What chance did a woman truly have in a naval courtroom, where even the laws were shaped by men who claimed piracy was unnatural for a woman? The answer, as history coldly demonstrates, was nearly none at all. Captured female pirates were almost never shown mercy. During the 17th and 18th centuries, the so-called Golden Age of piracy, the British Admiralty Courts showed little leniency toward piracy of any kind, and for women the offense was seen as doubly grave. They had transgressed not only the Crown's laws but also the rigid gender roles woven into the fabric of society. Trials were staged in makeshift naval tribunals, often convened in colonial outposts like Jamaica or New Providence. These courts operated without juries, and the verdict was typically a foregone conclusion. The process was fast, though never without performance. Evidence was presented through the words of ship captains, naval officers, and sometimes terrified sailors eager to avoid implication themselves. The accused, meanwhile, possessed almost no legal protections. Anne Bonny and Mary Read, two of the most infamous female pirates in history, were brought to trial in 1720 at Spanish Town, Jamaica. According to the official transcript, when Bonny received her death sentence, she lashed out bitterly at her lover, Calico Jack. "If you had fought like a man, you would not have been hanged like a dog." Their only real defense was pregnancy. Known as pleading the belly, it was one of the very few legal shields available to women. For Bonny and Red, the plea succeeded, though only temporarily. Most others were not so fortunate. Many women met their sentences in silence, fully aware that judgment had been cast upon them long before they opened their mouths. Hanged at Execution Dock for piracy. The Thames rolled past Wapping in silence, yet the voices of the crowd shattered the morning calm. At London's notorious Execution Dock, countless pirates, men and women alike, met their deaths, swinging from the gallows just above the river's murky tide. It was here that the British Empire staged its gruesome lessons against piracy, and female pirates, rare though they were, faced no softer fate. Under British maritime law, piracy was a capital offense. The Piracy Act of 1698, enacted under King William III, declared plainly that all and every person so offending shall suffer pains of death. Unlike executions on land, these were overseen by the Admiralty, and the chosen site, Execution Dock, was symbolic. Pirates would perish by the same waters that had once carried their freedom. Women convicted of piracy were condemned with the same finality as men. The executions unfolded in ritualized cruelty. From Newgate Prison they were carted through the streets of London, surrounded by armed guards and jeering crowds. Once at Wapping, the noose was set around their necks. The condemned were not granted the quick release of a long drop. Instead, the short drop ensured slow strangulation. This grim spectacle became known as the Marshal's Dance, for the dying body writhed and convulsed before going still. Though female hangings were fewer, they were no less merciless. Mary Critchett, an American woman who joined a crew of escaped convicts turned pirates in 1729, was captured near Virginia and tried in Williamsburg. She was found guilty and promptly executed, without reprieve, without spectacle, without even the shield of pregnancy. These public deaths were not only punishment but also warning. For the worst offenders, the final insult came with gibbeting, the corpse left hanging until 3 tides had passed over it. This was most often reserved for men, but the very threat served its purpose. Piracy would not be forgiven, regardless of gender. Beneath the shadow of the gallows, women who had once carved legends on the high seas were reduced to mere examples, sacrificed to uphold the empire's order. Before the noose, many female pirates first endured the lash. Flogging, an ancient punishment of searing pain, was a frequent sentence imposed by naval authorities and colonial governors to humiliate and break captured pirates. For women, the spectacle carried an additional sting. Their punishment was a theater of suffering. Their bodies turned into living warnings for all who watched. The whip most often used was the cat-o'-nine tails, a vicious tool of knotted cords capable of shredding flesh with every stroke. Sentences could range from a dozen lashes to more than 100, depending on the crime and the court's decree. The punishment was always delivered publicly, on the docks, outside prison gates, or in bustling town squares where crowds gathered, women and children among them, to witness the brutal lesson. In 1720, Anne Bonny and Mary Read, once seized by Jamaican authorities, were reportedly confined in appalling conditions and subjected to harsh treatment long before they faced trial. While no direct evidence exists of them being flogged during imprisonment, in other colonies, whether along the American seaboard or throughout the West Indies, female pirates frequently endured flogging, either as part of their sentence or as a brutal means of extracting confessions. For naval authorities, the flogging of women carried a dual function: deterrence and humiliation. Those who had dared to command or fight aboard ships were dragged down before the public eye, their flesh torn, their cries mingling with the salt air and the stone-paved docks. Such punishments were never only about justice. They were about power, about demonstrating dominion. And the spectacle of agony ensured the warning traveled far beyond the gallows. Not every woman taken from a pirate ship was marched to the scaffold. In many cases, especially in colonial ports across the Caribbean, West Africa, and the Americas, captured women escaped execution only to be forced into concubinage, coerced labor, or slavery. Yet evidence pointing to this fate for female pirates specifically is scarce. Historians concede that piracy was overwhelmingly a male sphere, but the women who ventured into it could face a variety of ends, shaped by their race, class, nationality, and the whims of colonial authorities. In Spanish and Portuguese dominions, where piracy, privateering, and slavery often blurred into one another, women seized aboard pirate ships, particularly those of African or indigenous heritage, were often sold into bondage, regardless of whether they had been active crew members or unwilling captives. Archival accounts from Portobello and Cartagena in the late 1600s describe women seized from pirate vessels and registered as spoils of war. Moreover, black and mixed-race women found aboard were frequently assumed to be enslaved already, folded into plantation economies, or forced into domestic servitude and concubinage by merchants or officials. The records seldom separated pirate women from other women captured at sea, making the boundary difficult to define. But the practice of forced servitude was pervasive. For many, capture did not mean the gallows. It meant disappearance into households, plantations, or shipholds, where names, stories, and lives were erased, not written into verdicts, but lost in silence. For some women, death did not arrive swiftly with the hangman's rope. It came slowly, unseen, aboard the decaying hulks of prison ships. These floating jails, anchored off colonial coasts and British ports, were never intended for human habitation. Yet they became dumping grounds for pirates, rebels, and enemies of the crown, including, on occasion, women. Although direct records of female pirates dying aboard these ships are limited, the broader reality is undeniable. Captured women endured the same conditions as men. By the 18th century, with prison populations swelling and jails overflowing, decommissioned warships were converted into prisons. Anchored in harbors like Portsmouth, Plymouth, and Kingston, Jamaica, they were stripped of sails and left to rot as cages of wood and iron. Life aboard was hellish. Shackled in dark, airless holds, prisoners suffocated in filth. Disease, typhus, dysentery, smallpox raged through the cramped decks. Food was meager, often rancid. Women faced even sharper perils. Beyond hunger and sickness, many suffered abuse and exploitation at the hands of guards or sailors, though such acts were rarely recorded. Lacking rights, their names seldom entered the ledgers at all. On these stagnant waters there were no public executions, only disappearance. And in that silence, the fates of countless women were sealed, forgotten not by oversight, but by design. Their punishments were never just verdicts. They were tools of fear, of gendered power, of imperial control. The destinies of female pirates reveal the depths of maritime society's dread of women who defied its order. Their stories linger still, in the silence of prison hulks, in the shadow of the gallows. What does their erasure from history reveal about power, justice, and who is remembered? Comment below. As the Roman historian Tacitus once wrote, "The more corrupt the state, the more numerous the laws."